with our serving on groups tips and tools and strategies for serving on decision-making groups. So today we'll be covering sections 4 and 5 of our Serving on Groups That Make Decisions guidebook. If you go to our website, servingongroups.org, which is at the top of the screen, you're able to learn more about this resource that we have to help parents, families, anybody who wants to get involved on a group that makes decisions, learn about some of the key information and skills that they'll need to be a part of these decision-making groups. So today we're going to focus on tools and tips. So section 4 focuses on tools that groups use to make their meetings productive and effective. These are some that we're going to cover today in more detail. Meeting facilitation, or having a group leader, ground rules, agendas, meeting minutes, written guidance, which could be policies, protocols, bylaws, or other types of information that's written down that you can refer to. And then finally, open and closed sessions. We'll discuss the difference between those two types of meetings. The first tool that can be used is a facilitator, a leader, or a chairperson who will keep the discussion going and make sure that everybody is able to share. There are some common strategies that all good facilitators are going to have. They will make everybody who's at the meeting feel comfortable and like their opinion is valued. They will encourage participation by everyone present at the meeting. They will prevent or manage conflicts when they arise between members of the group. Listen actively and observe people in the group to make sure that everyone is participating. Ensuring that quality decisions are being made by people on the group so that they're looking at the information available to them, reviewing it, and making sound decisions. And finally, they're going to make sure that the meetings stay on track and that the group accomplishes what needs to be done. So they're not going to be getting off track. They'll stick to the agenda and make sure those major points get addressed in the meeting. Another tool that's used by groups is ground rules. Ground rules are used to create an atmosphere where thoughts and perspectives can be openly shared. Other terms for ground rules are working norms, group guidelines, group norms, etc. It's helpful if the group agrees on what these ground rules are going to be and reviews them at each meeting. And sometimes it can be helpful to post them, either post them on the wall in the room where the group is going to meet, put them on the back of the agenda, put them somewhere where people can easily refer back to the ground rules, and somewhere where it's going to be easy to refer back to them during the meeting if you need to do that. Examples of ground rules might be to have everyone speak openly and honestly, to feel free to ask questions, because sometimes people who are new to the group feel like they need to ask permission to ask a question, or they're embarrassed about not knowing the answer. To be additive and not repetitive, so not to keep repeating the same points multiple times. To listen carefully and respectfully, not have side conversations, not go on your phone when a certain person is talking, and to pay attention and really engage in the conversation. Keep comments brief and stay focused on the task. Have phones on silent, starting and ending on time. Exploring our differences respectfully and looking for common ground, so not getting into a full-blown argument if we don't agree on something, and keeping all the information shared in the meeting confidential, especially if there are rules that require that. Sometimes meetings are very formal and they follow a certain set of rules and procedures, whereas other meetings are informal and they may just feel more like you're having a conversation with the people in the group. It's important for everyone in the group to agree on how the group is going to run, because it will make your meetings a lot more effective if everyone agrees on how the meeting should look. A tool that is going to be seen in some form at most meetings is the agenda. An agenda is basically a roadmap for how the meeting is going to go, and they can be formal or informal. However, they should only include items that are actually going to be discussed at the meeting. Usually the group's leader or the executive committee or steering committee is responsible for creating the agenda, but oftentimes whoever is responsible for making it will ask all the members if they have anything they'd like to change or add to the agenda before the meeting. This is a good way to make sure that all the topics or issues get put in front of the group, and it's a good way to prioritize to make sure that you accomplish the things that need to be done immediately or more quickly. Agendas are most useful if they're prepared in advance, shared ahead of time, and obviously they're most useful if they're followed. So there's no point to having one if the group is not going to follow it and try to stay on track. The facilitator of the group is responsible for following the agenda and does the following things. During the meeting, the facilitator welcomes everyone and sets the tone and the pace of the meeting. The middle part of the agenda is for discussion and decision. So the facilitator keeps the group on task, tries to keep people interested. We'll seek clarification by asking questions, clarifying questions, or ask for more information if needed. And the facilitator will also give feedback to the group and enforce the ground rules. It's important to do these things to keep the meeting moving along smoothly and making sure the meeting is successful. And then finally, the conclusion of the meeting is a wrap-up time where the group can identify the next steps, talk about what will be addressed at the next meeting, and set agenda items for the next meeting, as well as let people know the date and time and housekeeping type issues like that. Another tool that groups use are meeting minutes. Somebody at every meeting should be responsible for taking down the meeting minutes or informal notes. Meeting minutes are really a summary of the meeting. They don't necessarily look like what somebody's notes about a meeting would look like. They are a summary of what took place and the record of that meeting. So it could be who brought up a certain idea, who seconded motions, who voted yes or no on a certain motion, things to that effect. The meeting minutes also record the decisions that were made and the actions that need follow-up. One of your roles on a group will be to make sure that the meeting's minutes that you will review are accurate. Between meetings, somebody is responsible for typing up the notes and sending them to everybody in the group so they can take a look at them. And then at the beginning of your next meeting, you will take a look, and if anything needs to be corrected or added, those changes are made, and then the minutes are approved by the group. Groups that receive any type of government funding should make sure that their meeting minutes are made available to the public in some way. And finally, you should remember to take your own notes at a meeting. when you're taking a look at the meeting minutes, it might not reflect exactly what you remembered about the meeting. So when you're looking back, your own notes will be helpful to make sure that everything was recorded properly. The next important piece is time management. If meetings that you're attending are continually running over time, you might want to ask the group leader or the group as a whole, is the agenda too full? Do ground rules need to be established? Do we need to have a timekeeper? So somebody who's not afraid to interrupt us, tell us we're off track, and get us back where we need to be. And finally, does more time need to be scheduled for meetings? Are we trying to fit 2 hours into a 1-hour meeting? What do we need to do going forward to make sure that this doesn't happen and that we're using our time wisely? Many groups have some type of written guidance that helps people know how to interact with the group. All of the activities that your group does should conform with your written guidance. So some of that guidance might be bylaws. These are designed to help your group function in an orderly manner, and they're kind of like an operating manual for your group. Policies are different. While bylaws can make you do something or stop you from doing something, a policy is usually more like guidance. They are chosen because they're likely to achieve a desired result. And one example of a policy that you might see in a meeting is Robert's Rules of Order. So it's a guideline or a strong suggestion for how things should be done. Procedures and protocols are step-by-step instructions for how to complete a specific task. So policies are kind of rules for the organization, or that guideline we just discussed. The procedure describes in detail how the policy is translated into action. So policies and procedures contribute to the efficiency and the effectiveness of your group or your organization by making everything clear, and they're usually developed by the people who are responsible for carrying out the decisions. And then finally, another written guidance is compacts. Compacts are like a written agreement, and groups can find it helpful to write a statement of a common purpose, goals, or actions that they are going to commit to. By writing this down and having everybody sign the agreement, it becomes clear how they're going to share responsibility and work together going forward. Reviewing this compact from time to time will help keep the group focused and will also help the group see what they've accomplished together. Some groups are required to have open meetings, and some meetings are closed, which means that somebody from the public couldn't walk into the meeting and participate. However, even groups that have open meetings might sometimes have certain issues that they need to discuss privately. Excuse me. In an open meeting, the public is invited to listen to the group's discussion, and there might not be people from the public who attend every time, but the point is they're able to attend. They may also be given an opportunity to share their views or questions on a topic during a scheduled portion of the meeting. So this might be called a public comment, a citizen forum, citizen input. You might see this at a town hall, a school board meeting, other similar types of meetings. This type of opportunity for a public comment might not always take place in a meeting just because it's an open meeting. Having your meetings open builds trust and credibility in your work as a group. and it's a good way to connect with people outside of your group or organization. Closed sessions may be used by a group when it's not appropriate for the public or people who aren't a member of the group to listen to the discussion on an agenda item. There are certain topics that need to be dealt with in closed sessions, so that would be anything dealing with personnel issues or confidential information. And anytime there are closed session topics, the meeting minutes should not put in detail what was discussed. They should say only that the group went into a closed session at a certain time and then came back out at a certain time, and not provide information about what was discussed, especially if it's about somebody's employment or about a particular student or anything at all that would be considered confidential. Some reasons for unproductive meetings can be directly tied back to not following some of these tools that we've just discussed. So people aren't prepared, they haven't read things ahead of time or haven't received them ahead of time. There wasn't an agenda or people didn't see it before the meeting. The agenda is ignored during the meeting. People feel like their voice isn't being heard or that they're being ignored. There isn't data or information provided to people to help them make good decisions. There are no action items, so there hasn't been work going on in between meetings that the group can discuss and follow up on. There wasn't a timeline or a deadline set for the work of the group, so perhaps progress hasn't been made. Or maybe there has not been a follow-up since the last meeting and people haven't connected or communicated for the weeks or months in between meetings, and no progress has been made. Most professionals who go to meetings on a regular basis admit to daydreaming, so 91% say that they've daydreamed during meetings. 96% have missed meetings and 95% have missed chunks of the meeting. 73% say they've brought other work to meetings, and almost 40% say they have fallen asleep during a meeting. So this is from a study from 1998. So it would be interesting also to see what smartphones and technology have done to meeting participation. Because pretty much everybody has other work with them all the time, and it's possible to be focusing on something other than the topic of the meeting really at any moment. So these were some of the tools for having good productive meetings. Here are some more resources, including information about Wisconsin's open meeting laws. And next we will move into section 5. Before we do that, in your handouts you do have a Word document called the Organization Scavenger Hunt. This is an activity that can be used to interview a group or to go on a group's website and see if you can find information about the group and the tools that they use, so you can download that for your personal use. So moving into section 5, tips and strategies. We're going to discuss several things in this section. So some are about making effective meetings and improving the relationships in our group. And part of that is with two-way communication and with discussing how culture is a part of our relationships in our groups and our group dynamics. So some tips for effective meetings are, first, for the entire group to be prepared. So as we discussed in section 4, everybody has seen a prepared agenda ahead of the meeting. If there's anything that's going to be discussed in the meeting, people have prepared it ahead of time. If the meeting starts and ends on time, it will be more productive. So sometimes people become frustrated or demoralized in disorganized meetings. And if they're kept later than they planned, that can be very disruptive. Try to move through the agenda, put time limits on items if necessary, and if time management is a problem over and over again, consider having somebody be the timekeeper. Have the information needed to make decisions. So if you need to make decisions on a budget, make sure that all of the information about costs and resources is available to people ahead of time so they have a chance to review it in their own way, formulate questions, so you can really use that meeting time to have a meaningful discussion about the issue at hand. Make sure that everybody who's critical to the discussion is present at the meeting. If you're finding that you're not able to make decisions at a meeting, maybe you need to invite more people who are key people to accomplishing what you need to. Follow an agenda as we discussed, and make sure that everybody is on the same page. If you can tell that there are people who look like they don't understand what's being discussed, or if you're talking about a certain page in the handouts and you see someone looking at something different, take the time to just clarify what you're talking about, even without asking people to ask for help. Try to be perceptive of what people are doing, and don't put people in that awkward situation where they have to say, I'm lost, I don't understand, and because that can be embarrassing, it's better to just offer help without being asked and make sure that everybody in the group is making good decisions. Other strategies for improving your group dynamics will focus on how to make the group itself function better. So this can include having time for the group to share experiences and opportunities that are available to other members. Using icebreakers. This can be done by playing games that are pre-designed kind of icebreaker games or activities, or just by starting discussions using your facilitator to start those conversations. And also by allowing time for cultural connections. So having people really have the opportunity to share about their culture in an open way, and people can ask questions and really get to understand each other much better. Additional strategies would include providing an orientation for new members, even if they don't ask for it. And this orientation could also be used as a refresher for the people who may have been on your group already for years. And a lot of times people are going to appreciate that. Maybe they haven't looked at your bylaws or your policies in a long time, and taking the time to go over that will be really helpful. Understanding your committee structure, understanding the way that the group makes decisions. All of these would be helpful for everybody on the group, not just new people. Providing ongoing training and mentorship, so identifying opportunities for people to grow, both personally and professionally and as members of your group. Giving background information and history of the group when it's important to people who may not have been there since the beginning. And also consider using different ways to engage your members. Maybe an in-person meeting every time isn't the best way to go about having your meetings, and switching to a telephone conference or a virtual online meeting would allow greater communication and more access. Or maybe you found that virtual meetings just don't allow that face-to-face connection and they don't work for your group. But consider different ways of allowing people to come, and this might also open up your membership to somebody who maybe can't drive or take transportation to attend your meeting, but they could be there over the phone if they could call in. A proverb that we like to keep in mind is a quote from Helen Keller, which is that alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much. So this is a good quote to keep in mind when we're thinking about some of what's needed for us to really be able to work together and communicate and understand each other. So two-way communication is going to be really important to our group dynamics. Two-way communication is the difference between me just telling you something and the two of us having a conversation about something. And that not only applies on our group, but with communicating with those outside of our group as well. So if we're trying to get input from people outside of our group, some of the ways that we can do that are by having family surveys, opening up a family center in the community or in the school so parents and family have the opportunity to come in and share with us. Holding town meetings or public listening sessions, or in the case of some kind of governing board, having a breakfast with principal or a breakfast with your legislator type meeting where it's not one person with power or authority standing in the front of the room talking to other people, but really sitting down and talking with people, getting to know them, sharing a meal, and sharing that bonding experience. And any time somebody from your group is going to be speaking to people outside of the group, it's important to make sure they're clear about if they're representing your group or if they're just representing themselves as an individual person. So talking about culture in our group settings is really important. What is culture? What does it actually mean? We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth, and there are many different ways to look at culture. So one definition is the characteristics of a particular group of people defined by everything from language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. Another definition is the customary beliefs, social norms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. And another definition is the characteristic features of everyday existence, a way of life shared by people in a place or time. And that's about the closest to the definition that we're going to use for the purposes of this workshop. Culture is a way of life by a group of people. So if you look at our culture wheel here, you can see all these various components to culture. Each of us brings our own culture to a group, and here you'll see in the inner ring the things that are typically more of a permanent or an unchanging part of who you are. There are examples that can be given in the inner ring that might be up to some debate, but overall, for example, you can't change your age, or you can't choose the things that are on the inside. On the outer ring, you'll see things that are an important piece of who you are, but things that can change, and in fact, things that you might expect to change over the course of your life. So if you think about today and the answer for all of these things today versus how things were 5 or 10 years ago and how you'll expect things to be 5 or 10 years in the future, a lot of these you would expect to change over time. Each one of these things on this wheel is part of who you are, who I am, who everybody is. And Along with encouraging families to be engaged, we also need to be aware that every family is unique and is coming to us with different backgrounds that are really important in terms of how we make decisions. In your handouts, you'll see that there is a handout called Cultural Competency and Cultural Humility activity. This is a really great thing to do with a group of people to really talk about our culture, what it means to us, how it shaped us, and how we want others to see us and interact with us as a member of our particular culture. And this is a great way for groups to get to know each other and really expand their understanding of the culture of the people they sit on that group with. We are going to play a short video that really discusses culture well. Sometimes culture is represented like an iceberg, where the things we see just by looking at somebody or listening to them are just the tip of the iceberg, and the important things are underneath. But if you, when you see this video, you'll see a diagram of culture as a tree. So let's take a look at this video about Latino culture and some of the different pieces of it that are important to consider.
Is culture. Think of culture as being like a tree. What are some of the elements of culture that are on the surface? What elements are below the surface? The parts we often see, the branches and leaves, are things like clothing, food, holidays, and customs. These are not necessarily the most important part of culture. Instead, the hidden parts, the roots, are things like gender roles, orientation towards time or personal space, beliefs about education, attitudes towards in and out groups, values, even opinions about how the world works. These are not readily apparent to the observer, but often are parts that cause the most problems when we interact. Similarly, like a tree, culture is not a constant, unchanging thing, but rather is dynamic, growing, and changing. Any individual is shaped by his or her culture, but not defined by it. However, it is clear that the shared experiences, outlooks, and history of a particular group do have an influence, and this influence is quite important. It's easy to slip into categorizing and stereotyping based on superficial aspects of culture. Let's keep in mind, 100% of Latinos don't eat tacos 100% of the time. Individuals are unique, though influenced and shaped by their shared experiences, which are related to group membership, country of origin, language, etc. Latinos are not a homogeneous group. They are an ethnicity, and as an ethnic group do tend to share common cultural characteristics. Latinos and their families come from about 20 countries, but many have also been in the U.S. for hundreds of years. Indeed, before parts were the U.S. Latinos can be of any race. They can be of any social class, educational level, religion, sexual orientation, etc. Language and the Latino culture.
Okay, so as you can see from this video, even though it's talking about one certain type of culture, we have to make sure not to just focus on those leaves and the things we can tell are different just by looking at someone or listening to them, but think about some of those roots and the things, the beliefs and norms that really make people act the way they do and think the way they do. So part of understanding culture is the frame of mind in which you look at teaching others about your own culture and learning about theirs. So terms that you may hear are called cultural competency and cultural humility. Cultural competency kind of started out as the idea that if you worked really hard and went through classes and studied somebody else's culture, you could eventually master that culture. But this didn't really work out as a model because it's impossible to master someone else's culture, and this could also lead to some stereotypes. So it is important to learn about pieces of culture like mandates, laws, policies, practices, general attitudes, but not to put people in a box and think that this is some type of unwaverable thing that can't change. That's where the term cultural humility comes in. This is more of a lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique, to create relationships that are open and honest and not saying, my culture is better or worse than yours. And part of cultural humility is to think about power relations and think about working as partners with people of other cultures. And just really to make that lifelong commitment to be curious, ask questions, be willing to learn, and be willing to share. These are somewhat different ideas than what we may have experienced with in the past, but it's a really good way to think about sharing and learning about culture. So to understand these norms and increase participation of families from all different types of diverse backgrounds, here are some strategies in order to do that. One is to keep learning about the unique cultural values and beliefs of all members of the group and the communities that the group is serving. So you may have heard the slogan of the disability rights movement before, nothing about us without us. So if you're part of a group that's serving families of a variety of different cultural backgrounds and they don't have a voice on your group, that's something that should change, and they should be represented and their needs should be addressed. The members of the group should keep learning about cultural values and beliefs of everybody who is involved in any way. And remember, culture doesn't just mean our race or ethnicity, it means all of those things that we saw earlier on the culture wheel. We should take time to recognize and honor racial and ethnic variations, provide interpreters wherever we can, and not just interpreters, but also providing our written information in other languages in order to allow people to really meaningfully participate. Limit the use of jargon. So any of us who are working with special education related issues are going to be dealing with lots of acronyms, and I'm sure it's the same in lots of other fields as well, but making sure that if you're using jargon, you're defining it, and you're also making conscious decisions about whether you really need to use that jargon or if you can use plain and simple language that's going to be more accessible. Encouraging members to mentor one another as an ongoing process. It'll help them build skills and confidence, but also create those strong relationships. And then finally, using cultural liaisons to help inform the group, as well as connecting people in the community to the work of the group, and making sure that we're truly connecting with the people in our community about the needs of their group and the people that they represent. Here are some of the resources for Section 5, including Leading by Convening, which is a great resource to help groups practice shared leadership and shared decision making, and offers lots of different tools for growing our network of our group and really reaching out to everybody who's affected by the decisions that we're making. Where to go from here? So we do have 2 more webinars left in our 5-part series we're doing. Next week we will be doing section 6. And if you're interested in learning about either personal or group skills, section 6, which is about using and understanding data, is one that you should attend, and that will be next Tuesday from noon to 1 o'clock. And if you're interested in some personal skills for being part of a decision-making group, check out in 2 weeks we'll have sections 7 and 8, which talk about the role of families on decision-making groups and skills for serving on decision-making groups. In the meantime, for more information, you can visit our website at servingongroups.org. You're able to register for the upcoming trainings by clicking on that upcoming trainings tab at the top of the website. And we would really love to have you attend our next 2 trainings. Thank you for attending this workshop. This training was developed by the Wisconsin State Personnel Development Grant under the Wisconsin Department of Public Instructions in the Office of Special Education Programs. And it was developed with funds from the Center for Parent Information and Resources under the National Center for Systemic Improvement, and again under OSEP, and created in cooperation between FACETS and the Wisconsin Statewide Parent Educator Initiative, or WISPE. Your feedback is so important to us, so please take some time to complete the evaluation. And some final thoughts to remember is that leaders are not born. They rise out of a person's passion for how they want the world to be. That will conclude our webinar for today. If there are any questions or comments, feel free to write them in the chat box. Please check out our training calendar on wifacets.org, and you can register for our upcoming trainings. We have over 80 this year on a variety of special education topics. And remember to check your email later in the day, as the recording and evaluation will come to you. I hope that you have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you on our upcoming Serving on Groups webinars. First one will be next Tuesday, February 21st from noon to 1 p.m. Thank you again for coming.